The courtroom fell silent as the judge adjusted his glasses, reread the plaintiff's claim, and finally asked, with genuine bewilderment, "Let me get this straight. You're suing this man because he refused to let your HOA hold canoe yoga on his private lake." Janine Mulren, president of the Silver Birch Wide Community Association, stood up, indignantly with her shoulders squared, and her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "It's not just a lake, Your Honor. It's a shared natural amenity of our collective spiritual ecosystem." The judge blinked twice, clearly, processing what he just heard. Then he turned to me. Clint Harlow, 58 years old, wearing my usual jeans and flannel, holding my thermos and unconsciously fidgeting with a fishing lure in my pocket. "Mr. Harlow," he asked slowly, "do you in fact own the lake?" I sipped my coffee and nodded calmly. "Bought it cash in 1998. Your Honor, the deed says Lake Clint." The judge actually chuckled, a sound that echoed through the courtroom, like the first crack in a dam. And just like that, the HOA's case began circling, the drain like a kayak with a hole punched through its hull. I lived just outside the boundaries of Silver Birch, wide, a sterile subdivision filled with vinyl-sided homes, interpretive, mailboxes that looked like miniature, lighthouses and sailboats, and the kind of passive aggression that could suffocate a person faster than lake water in the lungs. As a retired DNR officer, I kept things simple at my place. A modest lakeside cabin, a well-maintained dock, and a hand-carved sign I'd made myself that read "Private Lake. Trespassers will be swim-tested." For 2 decades, my lake was peaceful. The bass were plentiful. The mornings were quiet except for the loons, and my biggest problem was the occasional raccoon raiding my cooler. Life was good. Then came Janine Mulren. Recent divorce, self-proclaimed life coach, and the newly elected tyrant and chief of the Silver Birch HOA. She moved during the spring of 2023, and within 6 months, she transformed the HOA from a mild annoyance into something resembling a suburban dictatorship. She saw my lake, Clint, not as the private property it clearly was, but as what she called an unutilized community resource. The fact that I didn't belong to the HOA and never had. She dismissed it with a wave of her manicured hand as just a clerical oversight that will rectify soon. I disagreed with that assessment strongly. It started innocently enough with emails that found their way to my inbox, despite me never giving the HOA my email address. Then came the glossy flyers, stuffed to my mailbox announcing sunrise. Paddleboard ceremonies scheduled for Lake Clint, complete with professional graphics and a QR code for registration. The audacity was breathtaking. I sent a cease and desist letter through. Certified mail. Janine replied 3 days later with an elaborate fruit basket and a passive-aggressive note written on lavender-scented stationery that said, "Let's not let ownership get in the way of togetherness." The following weekend, HOA members started showing up uninvited. Like ants at a picnic, they parked their SUVs on my carefully maintained grass, leaving deep tire ruts. They set up yoga mats on my private shore, their meditation music competing with the natural sounds of the lake. But worst of all, they snacked with reckless crumbage, leaving granola bar wrappers and organic juice boxes scattered across my property like confetti after a particularly depressing party. One morning, I woke up to find 12 people doing synchronized Tai Chi on my dock, while Janine live-streamed it on social media with the caption, "Manifesting Lake Harmony at our community's sacred waters." The dock, which I'd built myself over 3 summers, creaked under the weight of their collective enlightenment. When I walked out with my coffee to tell them to leave, Janine actually shushed me because I was disrupting their chi flow. I stood there for a full minute, genuinely wondering if I was having some kind of fever dream. The next incident involved what Janine called a blessing ceremony, where she tried to scatter rose petals across the lake while chanting something she'd apparently learned from a YouTube video. The petals clogged my boat motor, which cost me $400 to repair. When I sent her the bill, she responded with a gift certificate for a free life coaching session and a note suggesting I needed to release my attachment to material possessions. I installed a gate across my driveway, complete with a combination lock and another private property sign. This one featuring a picture of a cartoon trespasser being chased by an angry goose. Janine responded by sending what she called the Silver Birch Lake. Marshals, which turned out to be a group of middle-aged dads in matching polo shirts with embroidered badges. They'd clearly made at the local print shop. They showed up at my door to negotiate access terms while holding clipboards and wearing sunglasses, indoors like they were Secret Service agents instead of insurance salesmen and accountants. I handed each of them laminated copies of my deed and offered them armed floaties for my porch storage box, suggesting they might need them if they continued to misunderstand the concept of private property. They declined the floaties and left, but Janine wasn't done. She escalated her campaign like a general preparing for war. That's when Janine filed a civil suit against me. Her claim was so absurd that my attorney later framed a copy for her office wall. She argued that Lake Clint was inherently communal by proximity and should be managed as part of the HOA's extended amenities portfolio. But the rail kicker was when she claimed I had benefited spiritually from being adjacent to HOA-licensed FUNI consultants who had supposedly enhanced the energy of the entire neighborhood, and therefore I owed the community reciprocal access. I hired Deborah Holtz, an attorney known in repair-arian property circles as the Lake Kraken, for her ability to absolutely destroy anyone who tried to mess with water rights. She showed up to our first meeting with color-coded topographical maps, historical water rights documents dating back to 1892, and photos of Janine holding unauthorized paddleboard. Classes next to my no trespassing sign that was shaped like a largemouth bass. During the depositions, which took place in a stuffy conference room that smelled like old coffee and desperation, Janine claimed with a straight face that the HOA had invested emotionally in the lake and thus deserved seasonal access rights. She actually used the phrase emotional investment 17 times, according to the court reporter. Deborah responded by submitting drone footage that made everyone in the room lean forward in their chairs. The high-definition video showed HOA members littering on my property, playing ukuleles poorly while disrupting nesting waterfowl, and one particularly memorable scene of a man named Gerald attempting to release store-bought goldfish into the water because, according to his deposition, it would improve the lake's vibes and fun. That goldfish incident violated 3 separate local fish stocking laws. The county environmental department got involved immediately. Suddenly, Janine wasn't just fighting a civil suit about property rights. She was facing environmental fines that could reach into the tens of thousands of dollars. The judge, a no-nonsense man named Harold Fletcher, who'd been on the bench for 23 years, openly laughed during the proceedings. The moment that broke him was when Deborah presented a photo of Janine posting a handmade sign at the edge of my property that read Lake Clint equals our collective chakra with little painted butterflies around the borders. Judge Fletcher had to call a 5-minute recess to compose himself. The court ruled decisively in my favor on all counts. Lake Clint was confirmed as private property with no easements or access rights for the HOA or any of its members. The HOA had 0 jurisdiction over my land or water. Janine had committed multiple counts of criminal trespassing, and each documented incident was listed separately in the judgment. The judge awarded me $28,000 in damages for property destruction, legal fees, and what he called persistent harassment. Disguised as community building, he also granted a permanent injunction banning all HOA activities within 200 FT of my shoreline, effectively creating a buffer zone that included part of the public road. I used the money to build a 6-ft fence with decorative iron spikes at a duck sanctuary on the eastern shore, complete with nesting boxes, and install motion-activated sprinklers that played banjo music at maximum volume when triggered. The song of choice was Dueling Banjos, and it echoed across the water like a battle cry every time someone got too close. The HOA had to print a newsletter correction in their next quarterly publication. The title, mandated by the court, read, clarifying our relationship with the lake. It's not ours. They had to mail it to every household in Silver Birch Wide at their own expense. 3 weeks after the verdict, Janine was removed as HOA president in a 7-2 vote during an emergency board meeting. She tried to run again 6 months later under what she called the Lake Freedom Party platform, but the board voted to ban her from all future ballots and HOA positions, citing actions detrimental to the association's legal and financial standing. The final financial blow came when the county issued their environmental fine, $35,000, for illegal fish stocking and disruption of protected waterfowl nesting sites. When the bailiff read the amount, Janine's face went from red to white to a shade of green that matched the algae she claimed would benefit from her paddleboard yoga. She swayed in her chair, gripped the table with both hands and whispered, but it was just goldfish, before her attorney gently placed a hand on her shoulder to stop her from saying anything else that might make things worse.